essentially falls within both the spending cap and the tax cap levy. You're in a very good financial position going into the year. You have $8.7 million in surplus, as we all discussed previously. There's a couple of years coming up here where we're going to have an increase in debt service, so we have to be aware of that. And that's the surplus will put us in a position to try to make that gap between the debt service that's going to be increasing and debt that's coming off the books at the end of 2019. Over the last 6 years, you've only increased taxes by a total of $17,000 in 6 years total. That's what you've been asking from the taxpayers. The Moody's most recent review was outstanding, and essentially because of the financial position we're in. At the same time, there's going to be less and less, and all the towns are seeing this, we've seen it over 20 years, declining state revenues. The state is essentially pulling out of providing almost any revenues for municipalities other than those that are significantly insignificant revenue problems, inner cities, things along those lines. We've gone from 19% of the budget being funded by the state through their revenues in 1990 to 7.7 in 2006 or 2016, and if you look across the board, it's just been dropping generally. With 2011 being about 9%, between 1990 and 2000. Or 2011 was a significant drop of almost 10%, and then since then it's been about 0.5% or less a year, but it's going down, it's not going up, so you're going to be depending on the other revenues, which are local taxation and revenues such as surplus. Tax collection rates, again, for this year, or this past year, were 98.55%. That's an unaudited tax collection rate. It's 98.55. Again, it's very strong, very strong. It's a little bit less than, say, 2008, but from 2008 to 2016, all of the rates have been 98.5 or better. So those numbers are good. In terms of going into this year, there's a couple items that I pointed out to all of you in the line items that have some significant changes, just so that you're aware of them, in terms of some recommendations, and that they include some improvements with respect to our email system, which will increase the administration O&E by about $10,000. Some increases with respect to the solicitor's account due to some litigation issues. We're recommending that we bring in, we had a part-time person in the finance department go over to the police department. We'd like to see that person, a new person, come in. We've talked to somebody who's going for a CFO certification, who's capable of doing payroll, has done the budget in terms of payables, and knows the systems, that has an interest in working here, that if we move this up to a full-time salary, I think it would improve the human resource area. It's one of the areas that I think we're weak on, because the way our staffing is, with not a large number of administrative staff, everybody has a piece of it, and I think it makes it difficult for the employees and for all of us to get that squared away. Police and fire retirement system has a significant increase. It's not something that we get to do anything about. I can tell you part of it is because there's a retro. They're catching up with the retro and the salary from the last contract, and we're probably going to have that a couple years down the road because of this contract. That's something that goes on. I guess that's all from a basic standpoint. You have two budgets. I guess the budget you usually work with There's a summary budget right behind those main sheets, and then you have a detailed budget. And if people have questions on the detailed budget, that's usually where we've started in terms of looking at it to see if anybody has any general questions or needs any explanations on any of the numbers.
So, Jeff, we've spoken, I know that some of the other members of council have reached out to you. Many of the questions that I had, frankly, had to do with, we budgeted X amount, we spent a small fraction of that, or half of that, and we're budgeting the same amount, and I would say that the vast majority of those items, Jeff explained to me that either we hadn't received the bills for that, or they just hadn't created the bills and sent us over the invoices or whatever it was for that. So they were smaller amounts than we could anticipate, but that they would end up being the amount of money that were close to what we had budgeted. I remind everybody, this is a plan. It's not a bill. So these are best estimates of what the expenses will be. And, there's so many variables like our weather. Knock wood, we had a good year, and we're in the middle of a where's the snow kind of winter. Things hold and we continue to have these temperatures. We won't be spending as much money as we thought. I'm hoping that our tipping fees are reduced with the new trash program somewhat. And as I look through them, I mean, I don't really, we've been through this a few times. I know this is Tyler's first go around with this, although I think I remember that you were here in attendance as a resident the first time through. So let's see, if folks have questions, I don't have any questions only because I spoke with Jeff. My questions were not necessarily policy-based, therefore they were just for my own edification. If people have questions, let's talk about them. Chances are that other folks have the same questions. What we typically would do is just go through the pages. So that's probably, rather than jumping around. So I would say, members of council have any questions about anything on the first page? Typically we make a note as we go through.
When you say the first page.
Okay, I'm sorry. So we're on the detailed budget. It would be 1 of 16 in the budget. Yeah.
It's all right, because I have a question about that summary memo, more so than the actual pages.
Okay.
We decided last year to go to an outside payroll service. Is that part of the new employee's responsibility with payroll? Was that, you mentioned that it was in the memo too?
She would.
That we might take that back?
She would be a backup to the person. No, there's a person that does payroll. Payroll still takes a significant amount of time. It helps us with certain reporting, federal and federal withholding, all pension withholding, things like that. It helps us to some degree, but it doesn't take away the fact that we have to have a payroll person. But right now, our payroll person is, our backup is our CFO, and 3 people that we have working, sort of touching things in that finance department are probably all within a year and a half to retiring. And so we'd like to bring in somebody, instead of 20 hours a week, full-time, so that we have somebody who's in a position to kind of move in and do those things when they leave.
Now, would they also, you're talking about human resources, would they be like benefits administration?
Correct.
Employee, correct. All right. And then the only other question I had about that initial memo was there was talk in the memo about the administrative clerk's salary being split. Is that new for this year?
No, we've always done that.
Because I couldn't remember if I was.
Yeah, we've always done it. What we did this year is make it a straight 20%. 20% of the salary from the budget goes through to sewer, and 80% stays in the municipal for administration, clerk, and the CFO. With respect to the tax collector in that department, whoever works directly there gets assigned there, so there's no percentages in that area, but all of the three of us work doing both municipal and sewer, components. So it's always been done, but since we took over, but we figured we went to a straight 20%, and that's where the figure probably should be, because it's about what we estimate our time is about.
Okay, so there wasn't, is that why I was confused? It wasn't really like a percentage before?
No, it wasn't percentage before.
Okay, okay. That's fine. And, if you just indulge me, I only had one line item question, was about the police uniforms, where there was a question of whether or not the budget from 2016 was, like, mistaken.
Was mistaken.
Yeah, I have the same
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, that was,
So, because I'm like, I was like, we put out a bid.
I saw that, yeah.
Okay. That was the only line.
No, we had money within it, so it didn't impact it, but it was actually not carried over correctly.
Thank you.
And I guess we'll stick to the pages, but Gary asked a couple questions that probably would clarify some things, but I'll wait till we get to those pages.
Well, we could, yeah,
I mean-
rather than jumping around.
Yeah.
Greg, I'm gonna let you catch your breath, and then we'll cut to the sewer capital budget issues. We're just getting started with this. Well, do we wanna do that, since we're not really
I would,
into the...
Yeah.
hold this since you just
Yeah,
started
we
going,
haven't
and
started
everything pop
yet.
up.
So, have you caught your breath?
I have.
Line's up.
Thank you for consideration, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Mr. Pockner said he could get the stage right off the bat.
So, why don't
Well,
you take
we'll
the
jump
lead?
right into it. First of all, I have
Come
Jerry
right up
Harris.
here,
Sit here, 2 seats.
And, we do have that, and we have this in the book, right? How would I find what they talk about? Sewer capital is where,
Probably towards the back,
In the capital budget?
right here, sewer department. It's
give us a
after
second to get to the.
emergency management.
Sewer.
My difference in there is,
It's in capital, which is, way in the back, front of debt service. Okay, so the sewer capital.
I don't have it. I know it.
I don't hear it.
I got it.
So,
And then the stuff is after that.
Yeah, the detailed report. No, that's caps.
so we have
I
capital.
did that about 6 times.
In the capital.
So we have Greg Gillespie and Jerry Harris. Jerry is specific to the sewer department. That's where his highest level of expertise stands. And I'm just going to have you talk about we have 5 projects, I believe, that,
There's 4 actually for this coming year's fiscal year capital budget.
okay.
The other ones are from Jeff Williams.
Oh, I see.
The top 4, I think, right here.
Okay. So, let's just tick them off one at a time.
Let's just, we'll go through them. Jerry will talk about the, the specifics of the project. But of the 4 projects, just to summarize it, there's 2 projects that we're going to recommend that you put into your capital budget for 2017. That would be the Clay Street Pump Station rehabilitation and the tank weir cleaning improvements. The 3rd project involves upgrading your plant recycle wash water system. Right now, as a placeholder, we have a relatively large budget item set aside for that because we don't fully understand the needs and we believe that needs to be studied. So what we're going to recommend that you do is not put the full amount in there until we can come up with an accurate estimate. So what we're going to ask you to do is to budget for an initial study and preliminary design. Then we can really refine the budget estimate, and then in your 2018 budget, that would be the time to do that. But we'll talk about the specifics of that. And then the fourth project would be the installation of variable frequency drives for your plant blowers. The blowers introduce oxygen into your sewage. Right now, and Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 2 speeds on and off. If you had variable speed drives, it's a real energy saver. They're nearing the end of their useful life. But this may be an improvement that you can cover under a potential ESIP project. So I know you have an electrical consultant that's looking at doing an ESIP, and this may be an eligible project. So rather than going ahead and funding that in your sewer capital budget, we would recommend that you wait until you hear from your consultant and then determine if it's an eligible project. You may not even have to have it in the sewer capital budget, maybe able to do it as part of a townwide ESIP. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Jerry just to talk very briefly about the Clay Street pump stations has been kicking around for some time. We clearly think that's your top priority, and the weir cleaning improvements are something we recommend that you need to do as well. Jerry, we have budgets for budgeting purposes established that we've presented to you. So I'll turn it over to Jerry just to briefly talk about the project and answer any questions you have.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay, the Clay Street pump station dates to the early 90s. The equipment is old, it's worn out, needs to be replaced. But more importantly, it's an old kind of design for a pump station. To get at some of the equipment, the workers have to enter a very deep below ground confined space. It's a potential safety hazard. It requires a lot of safety procedures to do it the right way. We're proposing to change it to what's called a submersible type station, where the pumps are on rails and lowered down into the sewage. You need to maintain them, you pull them up to the surface and work on them. The electrical equipment controls are all relocated above ground, so people can get out of them without going down into this 25-foot tube into the ground. Also, it needs some work in terms of corrosion control. The discharge from the force main of the pump station goes into a manhole over by Route 130. There's hydrogen sulfide corrosion in that manhole that needs to be rebuilt, and we would propose to put a corrosion and odor control system at the pump station to try to alleviate that in the future. And as Greg said, we're recommending that you proceed with that project this year's budget. The second project is the tank weir cleaning improvements. The 3 main treatment tanks at the plant are big circular tanks. At the top, there's a metal thing that goes around the tank that has notches in it called a weir. And the sewage comes up through the tank, overflows the weirs into a trough, goes on to the next stage of the treatment process. And it's important that the sewage discharge uniformly over the weir. So they have a cleaning system right now that keeps any debris that might accumulate on there, or any gunk that fills up. But it's very old, dates back to, I guess, the last upgrade of the plant, Jeff?
No, dates back to 2007.
So,
The problem with it is the company went out of business. There are no parts. We cannot get brushes for them. We've been trying for 2 years to get replacement brushes. We cannot get them. This was one of the items DEP required us to have. Before I got here, we were under the ACO, and they required us to put the weir cleaning system in to help prevent algae from going into the UV system, which then hides fecal matter. So it was a requirement DEP that was put in. We cannot get parts for it anymore at all.
So we're recommending you proceed with that replacement. It's a relatively minor cost compared to some of the other projects.
Okay, so-
As Jeff said, it's something that's needed. Just briefly on the plant recycle wash water system, as Greg said, we're suggesting you take a look at it from an engineering standpoint to try to firm up the scope and the cost. I just want to emphasize it's pretty important that the plant, like many, recycles treated effluent before it goes into the Rancocas Creek, back into the plant for wash water, for use in the grit and screening process. And by doing that, you're foregoing the cost of city water to do the same function. So the system right now is not working optimally. It doesn't always supply water when it's needed at the proper pressure. So we believe that it ought to be fixed and so that it functions at all times, and therefore you can continue to forego the cost of city water to do that work. And it adds up. It's pretty expensive if you had to use potable water for that. But rather than have you budget for a number that we don't have any confidence in, we're suggesting a relatively small amount of money aside to take a look at it, studying it in like a preliminary design. And finally, as Greg said, the plant blowers are either on or off. They feed oxygen to the bugs that treat the sewage. Because they're either on or off, there's times when they're probably supplying more air than you really need. So by putting variable frequency drives on them, you can, and with oxygen sensors in the tanks, you can kind of balance the amount of air being put out versus what you need. And we think it has the potential for some significant energy savings and therefore cost savings. But as Greg said, we think it's probably best to first, as a screening, look at it under the energy saving program. If it looks like it's feasible and it's got a reasonable payback period, then we would suggest you consider it next year in the budget.
Okay, the other thing in the report, but not on this list, is the Adirondack program. So, Craig, why don't you just give us your 2 cents on that?
Well, we have, and I may ask Jerry to jump in on that, but we had reviewed information from Adirondack. Adirondack sells a device which, for lack of a better term, is a power conditioner. Basically what it does, it takes peaks, it's really what it amounts to is a capacitor. It takes peaks and valleys from electrical current that comes in and conditions it so that it is more even. By that, there's energy savings that you would realize. We had seen such systems before. We were a little skeptical on whether they worked or not. We have had companies come in, present to us, and they were really, at the time, we really couldn't recommend it. They came in and met with us, and they basically have shown from other clients that they have that there has been cost savings. In fact, they guarantee the cost savings. So our recommendation is that you should do some implementation and then take a look and see how they perform. My understanding is the agreement you'll eventually enter into with them will guarantee a decrease in your usage, which will save you money. I believe at one point we quantified it. They did look at the township's electrical bills. So my recommendation, and as we had said previously, is we recommend that you do some implementation of this, and then you're automatically guaranteed the cost savings. I think that they guarantee on a much, I think what you'll realize is more than what they're guaranteeing. They have basically said that they've implemented them for the Landis Sewage Authority, for Camden County, or a number of clients that they had, which have had good results. So since it's guaranteed, and they guarantee the cost savings, the payback period, I don't recall what it was at the time. I didn't prepare. I didn't know this would come up, but there is a payback period which we think is beneficial to the borough, to the township.
Right. Well, if they're as smart as they appear to be, it would make sense to under-promise and over-deliver.
Right,
so.
and then you can implement it, at a additional implementation as you can see with the cost savings, depending on how much you're willing to budget for these in your initial.
You mentioned other companies. What was the difference of them versus the other companies that made them better?
I think what it was is the people that represented it to us didn't understand what they were selling. I think that there was an inventor at the time, and the marketing people they had couldn't convince us of how it worked and the savings that you would realize from it. And we had an electrical person, unfortunately he's no longer with us, he passed away, but he was the hardest person to sell, and we brought the inventor in. It's proprietary, so they couldn't give you the details of how it works, but it's a capacitor, which is an electrical device that smooths out spikes and peaks and valleys in current. And, because we had seen the results with other authorities and got recommendations, we said, hey, you ought to give it a try because the savings are guaranteed.
Is this the only company that guarantees?
I don't know that because no one else has approached you or approached us on it. But I think their only entree is to guarantee it because, there has to be some kind of track record for how it works. And there is an initial capital investment, so I think that their sales promotion is basically to guarantee it. And if they don't, they don't.
Right. And this would have to go out to bid anyway, so if there were other companies that were doing this and willing to guarantee the results, they would bid.
And generally, we have, we would specify a specification around what we knew would work, and then if someone comes in with an equal, then we would evaluate that at the time of the bid.
Okay.
Go back, before we go further, getting back to these 4 projects, are there any, like, the first one, is there any grants available for sewer projects?
Well,
like that?
Generally, the savings when you say grants, no, because, everybody, the problem with sewer systems, they operate continuously forever. The best funding mechanism that we know of is the EIT, but a lot of times you have to put together some significant projects. In some cases, there's principal forgiveness, but in terms of grants, if they were available, we would find them.
If we package these projects together, could we get that level to go through EIT?
You could, it could become a timing issue for you if you do that, because, and I'll let Jerry speak to that. But the answer is, yeah, I would think if you're going to budget for anything more than $1 million, that's kind of the break-even point. If your improvements are less than that, the problem is the administrative costs really kind of wipe out the benefits that you would get. But, Jerry, if you want to.
Just something I was just.
There used to be deadlines for the trust for submitting certain things at certain times. They've done away with that. So if you decide to go that route, there's nothing holding you up in the way of a missed deadline or anything like that. As Greg said, these 2 projects together, they're kind of on the borderline. We did a project a couple of years ago for improvements to the plant. It was about, I guess, $2 million total. That went through the trust. It wound up being a burden at times on the staff with the paperwork. So it's kind of a toss-up. I think what will happen in this case, though, from what I've seen, is you won't be able to combine the projects. You can submit them
That's the
both.
other issue.
They'll say, oh, one's a pump station, the money comes out of this bucket. The other's the treatment plant comes out of this bucket, make it 2 projects. Then you got, certainly for the smallest one, you've got more paperwork than it's worth. So maybe the pump station alone would
That's
be
what I
worth
was
it.
looking at.
But, if we have time to consider that and see which way you want to go with it. But Greg said it's probably the best game in town, interest rate-wise.
Is this a reimbursement situation, or, so this is not something that would necessarily hold up the project itself?
You would have to budget for the project, yes.
So we can do that, we can move forward.
Yeah.
And still make those applications, and see if we get them.
As Jerry said, it used to be there were deadlines where you had to have a planning document submitted to the state by a certain time, and then have plans and specifications done. Like, if we had that old cycle, we wouldn't be able to do that until, what we would do, you'd have to budget for it now, and then we'd have to go through the process, but we wouldn't make the deadlines in terms of having the plans and specifications together. Now that it's more like a rolling application system, it wouldn't preclude you from doing that. The delay would occur with the amount of time the state has to review things, but you'd still be on target. There would probably be some delay time to have the DEP, go through the process and getting all the paperwork done, all the administrative stuff. But it wouldn't be, you don't have the hard and fast deadlines the way you had previously. So you're correct. If we decide a month from now or 2 months from now when we're preparing plans and specifications that you want to go through the trust, it wouldn't be anything to keep you from doing that. It would delay the project a little bit because you have to go through.
And you'd have to weigh out the cost of what it's going to do to prepare it
Yeah.
versus the benefit of what we get.
Right, and I would tell you, based upon the size of this project, it's borderline. You're going to delay the project and you're going to get some savings, but you're going to have increased costs because we're gonna have, you know, in order to go to the DP, we have to meet their submission requirements. It will be a little more costly on the soft end.
You'll look at that just to.
We will.
I have a couple questions. The first one's actually for Jeff. Jeff, the utility budget doesn't differ the capital budget from what the rules are with the municipal capital budget, are they?
Yeah, it actually does.
Okay,
You
so
don't,
if
you don't
it's-
need the down payment money.
Okay, but if it's part of the capital budget, because I was listening to part of it, we're waiting for this energy analysis, we could include something in the capital budget for the sewer and do or not do it throughout
Correct.
the year? Okay.
Correct.
Because Greg had recommended that maybe we, put that one off, but what's the harm in having it in the capital budget? It's just the
Well-
flexibility.
It always pays to have it
Yeah.
budgeted.
Yeah.
The
that's
issue
what
is,
I'm
it's
saying.
just, I have to tell you, like, the number that we would put in there for the recycling, water, we'd have to put it on the high
Well,
side.
that's something different, but when you're talking about the motors.
Okay,
the blowers.
I understand.
Just,
You're right.
I mean, if it turns out that it's not part of that program, well, we may decide that we want to move forward with it.
The answer is you can absolutely do that.
And my second question had to do with the Adirondack. Would that be something that would be, you would consider similar? I mean, where it's an energy program, should, I mean, I don't have any problem putting it in the capital budget, but do we consider waiting on that electrical analysis before we start making changes from an engineering perspective?
It's a fair question. I'd have to look into that. I may even want to call your electrical consultant to find out if that's something that he would look at as part of his analysis for your ESIP.
So if he's saying in the ESIP that there's gonna be his analysis and his recommendations will save X amount of dollars, then, we would just need to make sure that Adirondack would be the percentage of savings over and above that, depending on, if they installed when we were at that savings point.
Well, I think what it would be is that if it could be included in your ESIP, it would just be done as a different program. Instead of being budgeted as part of your sewer capital, it would be part of an ESIP for anything else that you're doing. So I think along with what Mike said, you could budget for the work that Adirondack would do, or whoever the, and
Right.
and at the same time put the variable speed drives in there, and then, you don't implement those projects until you get some kind of study completed from your electrical consultant.
Because I just don't want to see us, 3 months from now, they have something to show us, and then we have to wait till 2018 before we can start moving forward.
That makes sense.
When's the ESIP that's started? That study, do we know?
He started, he just got the information, he started reviewing the information.
Do we have a
That was,
timeline?
did you
of
find out how long, that was?
He hasn't got back to me
Jeff?
yet. It should be about a month.
Oh, okay.
Jeff, I meet with their engineer on the 9th of March. If you want me to give them the Adirondack report that we have, please let me know. If you don't want to give me to do them, let me know too.
I would say throw everything out we can.
One of the
Yeah.
things,
I know,
one of
I
the things we're
estimated.
discussing is the VFDs, so. Okay.
Let's have them look at everything. Let's approach this holistically and see what works. I mean,
I would have it.
they've been patient so far, Adirondack. I mean, it's been years since we've been talking about this, and I think it would have been paid for by now, but we wanted to be cautious, and if we can find a better way to finance it, that'd be great. Does anybody else have any questions for our engineers? This is good. I think we're good. Do we have anything follow up?
Nice seeing you again.
Reach out.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
All right, great, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so we're gonna flip back to our page 1 of 16.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Thank you,
I
Jerry.
feel like I'm taking the first one.
Yeah, you have
Thank you,
to.
Jeff.
You want a brownie for the road?
Jerry, come on.
Just no? Yeah, take two. Good. Have a safe trip back. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay, so, so let's go through, you know, this is, so anybody have any questions on page one? I think we're just gonna move through these, if somebody does, then speak up. If